Welcome to everyone here. What we thought we wanted to do is get together today just as a very quick presentation. And our main audience here is administrators, and trying to help our members present a case to local administrators in case you need additional support about why speech and debate is an activity that can and should be supported in the fall. We understand that the reality of COVID has made a lot of difficult choices for a lot of school districts. But I think one thing that we know is that we want to provide the right sorts of opportunities for our students to get together in meaningful ways to do things that are important for their mental, emotional, and academic health. And so we would propose that speech and debate is an activity that fulfills those missions. Just so that you understand who we are, when your name pops up, just introduce yourself.
I'm Brother John McGrory. I'm chair of the New York City District. I'm also the state coordinator for the New York State Forensic League, and I also do a good deal of work with organizing tournaments on Long Island, as well as being the director of speech and debate at Chaminade High School on Long Island.
I'm Mary Gormley. I am the New Jersey District Chair in New Jersey. I've been doing this for over 30 years, and I've been District Chair for about 18 of those. So I have been the coach at Montville High School, which is a public school, till about 2 years ago. And then I moved over when I retired to Del Bart School in Morristown.
I'm Sarah Donnelly. I am, as Joe's slideshow says, I am the district chair for the New England district, and I'm the director of speech and debate at Natick High School in Massachusetts. I have been at Natick High School, give or take, since 1983. I was a student on the speech and debate team in the mid-'80s, and after a brief hiatus, came back as one of its coaches in the early 90s and have been there ever since. I also work closely with the Massachusetts Speech and Debate League and their board of directors.
I'm Joe Vaughn. I'm the district chair for the Hudson Valley New York National Speech and Debate Association District. I'm also the vice president of the NYCFL, which is our local league, as well as the tournament director for the New York State tournament, as well as for numerous other tournaments around the region, including the Yale Invitational and the Princeton Invitational, and a host others.
Hello, I'm Lauren McCool. I'm the Education and Recognition Coordinator at the National Speech and Debate Association, which is based in Des Moines, Iowa. We're one of the largest organizations for student recognition in the country, and we specialize in speech and debate for grades 6 through 12. One of the things that we are particularly doing is trying to meet the needs of teachers as they adapt in this difficult time. We did just complete the world's largest academic competition entirely virtually about a week ago. And so we are charging forward in this uncertain time, as we all say, in order to still provide opportunities for students to share their voices, learn from each other, and have the opportunity to compete in forensics.
Thank you so much. So just as an outline for the rest of our presentation, 3 main bullet points here as to why we believe that your school should support speech and debate in the next school year. First, that the activity provides essential skills, both for life as well as academics. Whoops, man. Sorry. Second, that speech and debate provides unique opportunities for community building. I'm on our school district's restart committee for the fall, and one of our main objectives is to find places and ways to get our students connected both to each other as well as the institution. And we believe that speech and debate provides ways in order to do that. And then third, we have proof of concept. as Lauren just said, over 6,000 entries competed last week, with several hundred or thousand adults also participating in the role of judges. So we know it can be done both on the large scale and the small scale, and we'll talk about some of what that looks like later. So just to start out, essential skills. So let's just talk through a couple of these as we see them. So first, communication. I think that's an obvious one. As speech and debate, we are talking about communication skills. I think in years past, it used to be stated that communication was a soft skill. And I think that we've overthrown that notion that if you can't communicate your ideas clearly and effectively to others, then most of the rest of what you're trying to accomplish can't happen. So speech and debate is not a soft skill, it is an essential skill. So next, argumentation. Brother, do you want to take that one?
Well, argumentation, I think, is very important in these rather challenging times. We need people who can stand up for what they believe in and who can speak in a way that they're understood and that they can make their arguments understood, and who are capable of listening to people who may not agree with them and come to some sort of an understanding between them. And debate challenges and extemp and all of those other categories, they place a challenge on a student, especially debate, where if you're doing switch side debate like Lincoln Douglas, half the time you're probably arguing for an idea you don't necessarily agree with. And I always tell students, well, I want you to argue that one because I want you to understand what people who don't agree with you think, because I want you to realize they're oftentimes good, virtuous people who may not see things the way that you do. And this may give you a chance to understand why they believe what they believe. And I think that the more that we can argue like that, the more we can come to some understandings between one another in our country and the world.
Great, thank you. Interpretation. So Mary, do you want to speak a little bit about the process of interpretation?
Well, the process of interpretation takes literature, and the students are to look at that piece of literature, actually, to sort of link to what Brother John has said, to find the argument and the purpose that the author is trying to convey. And then they are to learn to edit that piece of literature into a 10-minute piece, and yet still be able to reflect the wishes and the purpose of that particular writer that they are interpreting. And then we have certain interpretive events that they perform with another student. And then we also have what's called program oral interpretation, where they take the arguments of many different authors and they synthesize them into one piece of literature, using the argument, the central argument that each of them are making in order to make that a reality for their audience.
Great, thank you. Interpersonal awareness. Sarah, do you want to speak about that?
Sure. So I think that one of the things that I like most about the activity doesn't relate directly to the skill set that it takes, but it's kind of what the students take away with them. And that's one of the things, is their interpersonal awareness. And, you know, I've witnessed this in my students over the course of years, and how the skills that they're taking away from this apply later in life. And, you know, one of the things I love most is that they come back and they say to me that they were heads and tails ahead of their classmates in college simply because of what they have taken away from the program. Whether, you know, certainly the technical skills, the interpretation, the argumentation. You know, one of the things that I always say about speech and debate is that we are giving people the skill of learning how to present themselves powerfully through the spoken word. And there isn't a better skill that we can give to our young people than that. But then they're also taking away some of this, you know, it's a confidence. Lauren, you might be able to shoot what's the stat of the, what's that stat? Sorry, the NSDA has done a nice job of putting together some stats about, you know, student readiness and about build of confidence and you know, performance in school and interests in academics and all of that. But I think that what the human being gets out of it more than what the student gets out of it is kind of my favorite part.
And Sarah, you hit upon the last bullet there. Well, confidence. You know, our students leave understanding a lot more about themselves, I think, than your average high school student does. I mean, these are kids who on a regular weekend stand up in front of strangers and pour their hearts out, or, you know, argue for really difficult things and have no problems doing it. And that confidence serves them really well later in life. So those are some of the essential skills that we thought. And by the way, if anyone has anything to add on to them, don't feel shy at all about jumping on it.
Well, I think with regard to confidence, I cannot tell you how many students I've had come back and say that that confidence made it possible for them to network with other people outside of the realm of speech and debate, and that in the process of interviewing for a job, they knew that if they hit that level, if they hit that interview, that they would have the job. And they were not only just confident in that, they were reassured by the fact that they did get the job.
I think for me, that is one of the skills that I, as a former debater, value the most, is the ability to adapt to my judge. Throughout life, I have lots of different people judging what I do. And it could be my spouse, and we're having a conversation on, you know, a financial decision we need to make. It could be a friend who needs some advice. But speech and debate, both sides of the activity have taught me how to tailor my communication so that the audience is hearing the best information for what they need to decide upon. And I think that right now, as our students are constantly being bombarded with a variety of opinions and moments where they need to make a decision and then they need to be able to communicate their perspective, speech and debate is a great practice and training ground for them to be able to do and to cultivate that skill in a way that's going to serve them, like my panelists here have said, in job interviews, in conversations with friends, interpersonal skills, both professional and personal. And it just makes you able to communicate to people in a way that is meaningful rather than just transactional.
Great. Thank you very much. So the second prong of this is community building.
Joe.
Yes.
We also have a comment from Mary Dreyer that, and I agree wholeheartedly, that listening is one of the essential skills that we didn't mention, that debate teaches people how to listen, and that's absolutely true.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Great. So second major prong here is community building. And I'll just talk a little bit about that idea that if you start reading a lot of the educational magazines, what we're finding out a lot about this time of pandemic is that a lot of what the students are missing, students don't miss curriculum, let's just be honest. Students miss the opportunity to be in the presence of other people, to learn from others, to grow together, to have fun. And the distance learning environment has been really tough on school communities. And finding ways of bringing kids together in order to create social opportunities for them around meaningful things, as well as create opportunities for them to connect their experience of education to the high school is invaluable. The statistics on how well a kid does in school as a function of how closely they feel connected to their school is really quite startling. That the greater, I mean, it sounds obvious once you say it, that the greater connection the student feels to the school environment, the better their performance is. And so we feel that the speech and debate provides that opportunity to be a smaller community inside of a larger community, and a community that can be very much focused on connecting kids to school culture. I mean, I know in our debate groups, we start the kids off by having debates about school culture and about interrogating that. That's actually how we teach our novices how to do debate, is talking about the small events happening. It's how we teach our kids how to do extemp. We give them questions based on school culture. We do interpretive stuff. I mean, everything in our novice program is about connecting the kids to the school community and to each other, because it'll ultimately be better for their success as a student, as well as their just interpersonal relationships. And I think in this time of distance, bringing people together has to be one of our greatest priorities. Second, community building with other schools, because by its very nature, speech and debate is interscholastic in terms of that competition. And so would anyone like to speak on that notion?
Well, I think different from other activities, whether that be sport in particular, is that although the students are competing against one another, I feel that this activity is less adversarial, that there is a sense of community within the community, where students get to meet people of like mind and spirit, and build on those relationships long after they have graduated from high school, and have used those resources in making connections once they're out of school and into whatever the career that they have chosen.
And I'll add on to that, Mary. One of the unique things about our activity is that our students compete. They begin competition in early September and they continue until the end of June. So unlike a lot of the other extracurriculars and athletic activities that students are involved in, that community just has more of a chance to build, and there's quite a bit of, in normal times, there's quite a bit of traveling and so that community just sort of builds upon itself. And one of the dangers that I'm afraid of next year is that community not having the opportunity to continue what it does best, which is to support its members, So I think even more important next year for folks, this is a time where folks are saying, maybe we need to back off a little bit. And I think that in this particular situation, that's going to be really detrimental to the community building.
I agree with you, Sarah. I think this is actually a time to lean in a big way. I mean, when I do exit interviews with my students who leave my program, one of the first things they always tell me about why they love the activity is they say things along the lines of, I have friends in Iowa, right? I have friends in California. Like, my kids leave with friends from all around the city and all around the country. And getting people out of their bubble is getting them out of their comfort zone and letting them understand a lot about things going on in the rest of the world. And I think it really raises awareness, because most kids' experience in school is just their community, the people that they grew up with, and just learning to see other perspectives from the lived experience of people who become their friends has been, for me as a coach, one of the most valuable things about the potentials of this activity.
So I had a student who competed in World Schools Debate last week, and obviously these are made up of students from different schools within our district. Well, the students' teammates on her World Schools team were private school students from within Massachusetts. Some of them were anyway, but they were not necessarily from Massachusetts. So she had teammates who were from China and from Vancouver, and from all over the place. And just over the course of the last few months in practicing together, even virtually, she said to me that it was fascinating to her that she has literally never met her teammates because all of the World Schools prep was done virtually. We actually we announced our decisions the day we went into quarantine, which was coincidental. But she had never physically met these people. And she said, I feel like I've known them forever. And these are relationships I'm going to continue on for the rest of my life. And I just think that we are uniquely positioned. Speech and debate is uniquely positioned to continue to keep kids engaged, because though it is a different environment, it looks different, and let's be honest, it feels a little different. What we do can be done from my dining room and your office and my students' living room down the street and anywhere in the world.
I also think one of the things we in the speech and debate world know is a lot of our tournament time is spent waiting. Hurry up and wait.
Right.
So there's a lot of downtime, which I think builds this community with other schools in between rounds, whereas people have said they have made friends from all over the country. And I think that that's a great building experience.
The last community building thing I think is just important for, especially in this particular moment, is that I believe that our students understand when they graduate, because they've been tackling with these topics in debate rounds, or from hearing about the experiences of others in their interpretation rounds, they know a lot more about the world and its problems. And I think as we've seen in the last couple of weeks, that this is a moment for our young people to lead in a lot of ways because of the social awareness that they have, and maybe they don't have some of the baggage that some of us have, but speech and debate builds this capacity to understand empathetically the experiences of others and gives them the tools in order to voice their concerns in a way that we really need right now as a society. And so I think that the connection, I mean, the number of my kids that are now, my former students that are now activists or in public policy or in public service, it's really quite tremendous. And I think a lot of that comes from what they found in the speech and debate community naturally attracted them towards those sort of life missions.
So I think it's interesting you say that, Joe, because I think that speech and debate has handed them the two things that they need in order to follow that sort of a path. First of all, the tools. They need the tools. They need to be able to actually do the job of being an activist, but they also need the confidence. And, we start telling them when they're in 9th grade, you have a voice, your voice matters, your words matter. And we just keep pounding that message into them. And to the point where at some future date, they say, my voice matters and I know how to use it right. So, I mean, and we saw that in Florida 2 years ago, and we've seen it time and time and time again, where our students lead the way. And, so this is an opportunity for us to support that.
And I think that it takes them out of their little bubbles. Every community has their bubble, and the demographic in that bubble sometimes does not vary. And yet when they go off to a tournament, whether it be on ground or virtually, they are meeting people from, as you've already said, from other communities that are very different from their own community. They have to interact with those people. It is certainly a multicultural, diverse community that they would not necessarily experience in their own hometown in their own comfort zone.
So next, how does speech and debate work in a distance environment? I don't think we could sit here, I was about to say stand here, but sit here and say to you, advocate to you that this is something you could support if you didn't know that something was going to happen. So what I wanted to just to first talk about is how we know that this is going to work before we talk a little bit about how we know what we're doing next year. So proof of concept, we have two really strong case examples that have happened this spring. And so first was the Massachusetts Speech and Debate League State Championship that was held over Memorial Day weekend. Sarah, do you want to talk a little bit about what that looked like? And
Sure.
Thank you.
Sure. So our state championship was originally scheduled to be held in early April, and obviously that was canceled. And for a while, we thought it was going to be canceled altogether. And a group of us got together beginning of May, I would say, and started to talk about what we could do and what this might look like for us. And one of the things that we started to talk about was to follow the model that many of the online tournaments had done, where debate would be synchronous and speech would be asynchronous. And you know, and I said to the group that night, I thought that we should look at the idea of doing synchronous speech rounds because that was more community building and more of an experience for the kids, that it felt a little bit like that, you know, doing it in an asynchronous manner felt a little bit like mailing in for a contest, you know, and that wasn't what we were trying to build. And my thought was, if we can do it in debate, can't we do it in speech too? And it turned out we could. Were there bumps? Of course there were. It was the first time any of us had done this. And, you know, I found at nationals last week that, you know, people kept asking questions back and forth. And, you know, those of us who helped to run tournaments know every question that's going to come at us. And now we don't anymore. So were there bumps? Of course there were. But we had 550 students competing, close to 300 judges. And we did it over 2 days. We did it, we powered it on Zoom. We bought a ton of Zoom accounts, short-term Zoom accounts. We worked with Zoom and they were able to do sort of a group rate for us. And so we had Zoom room managers who were in charge of security and making sure that only students who were supposed to be there were allowed into the rooms. And it operated very much like you've seen other tournaments happening, except for the fact that we did manage to do it in a synchronous manner. So that provided a lot of challenges, but we managed to get through it.
And the second case example Lauren was speaking about before. So Lauren, do you want to tell everyone how a little bit about how the tournament went?
Absolutely. It was a success, meaning it happened. That was the big thing that we sat around the table in March in our offices in Des Moines and started to have conversations about what will it look like if schools start shutting down, and then a week later schools shut down. And just like everyone else in the country, we had these rolling conversations. And what ended up happening is that the national tournament was run partially live and partially recorded, simply because we were paving a new road. We were building the plane while we were flying it. And that was the easiest way to conquer it at that moment. And through our online tournament tabulation software, which is called tabroom.com. We hosted the tournament in a safe fashion where everyone had to log into a platform using a specific login so that student safety was prioritized. And with only a couple of hiccups that were solved pretty quickly, we got about 6,000 people into that platform over the week. And rounds were debated live, and rounds were judged by multiple judges in speech. And we're excited that it happened and students got to have that opportunity. We are, of course, hoping moving forward that we will be able to be live and in person again. But as a stopgap measure and as a response to the needs of our coaches and our members, because we are a membership organization, we are developing and going to introduce to the public something called NSDA Campus, which is a more publicly available version of what happened through the tournament, with already some things we've already learned. So it's even better than what the tournament was. It will be slightly frustrating. I can't give you all the details right now because, like I said, we're still building the plane. And but those details will be made public for anyone who's interested on July 15th. And at that time, coaches and organizations and leagues will be able to start testing out the system. They'll be able to learn about costs and things like that. Plus, they'll be able to see how we're going to protect students through the system and how safe it is. That's been a big priority of the administrators that advise the NSDA and of our board in general. So NSDA Campus is on its way, and we are excited to be able to offer it to not only our members, but to other people as well.
I think Sarah.
Can I jump back? I'm glad you brought that up, Lauren, because I should have mentioned that, especially in the interest of giving credit where credit is due. Being from Massachusetts, we're lucky enough to be the home of the developer of tabroom.com and NSDA Campus. And so when we started having these conversations about what we were going to do, and we ran speech on Zoom, but we did a field test of Campus, NSDA Campus, in our debate events. And, you know, we were all talking about, you know, what will we use to make this happen? And I said, all right, well, if there's one person in the world who knows both sides of what we need, it's Palmer. I want to pick up the phone. And I talked to Palmer and I said, you know, what's the right thing? And he said, well, let me check into this, but I think that Campus is going to be ready in time. And so we had Chris Palmer there with us every step of the way, and he brought along Aaron Hardy with him, and they supported us the whole way. And that went just really swimmingly, and we weren't sure. And we literally, the night before the tournament, said, is this going to work? And we went, well, it's either going to work or it isn't going to work. And that was what we were left with the night before the tournament. And we decided to just pull the plug and go ahead and go all in with NSDA Campus for our debate events, and it worked brilliantly. So, you know, I don't think that any of us can be here without a huge hat tip to Chris Palmer and his team, and, you know, just a huge thank you to him for that.
Yeah, I had the benefit of helping out on the debate side, on the tabbing side. So getting to see what the campus looked like from the back end and what it looked like from the front end. And I got to tell you, it was just seamless and so easy. We had very few problems. It was, and what people reflected back to us over and over and over again was, it was so clear how important the notions of privacy and security were encoded right into that. So I think, I think we have to, like, as Sarah was saying, thank Chris Palmer, but also thank the NSDA for supporting that work, because I think in the fall, for a lot of us who are uncertain about, like, how are we going to practice with our teams and how are we going to do this, that resource is going to be invaluable, just in terms of doing normal competition. So just to do a little bit about pros and cons, though, about virtual tournaments, because they're going to be a bit of a reality. Some potential benefits for districts is no transportation costs. I know for a lot of districts, the transportation cost is probably one of the largest barriers to sending kids to tournaments. Now, tournaments will, of course, have entry fees of some description in order to defray their costs, but that bus is generally the biggest line item cost. So a virtual tournament would not have those barriers to entry. And second, unlike a lot of other interscholastic activities, whether we're in a distance format or not, speech and debate both can and will happen. So it is something that schools can rely upon to know as an outlet for their students. As I just said as well, I think the opportunities for interscholastic competition and engagement are going to be kind of few and far between in the fall. And knowing that you have an outlet through speech and debate, I think that guarantee is really important, that with the uncertainty of waiting for various governors to say whatever it is that they're going to say, what we can tell you is that there will be a speech and debate season hosted by your local league in some way, shape, or form that kids will have access to as long as school districts support it. As well as community engagement. Something that I found with the distance platform is oftentimes we go to our community to get judges. And it's very difficult to get people for an entire day. And I was able for nationals to get a couple of former competitors, a couple of parents of former competitors who all volunteered to judge for the tournament and re-engage with both the team and the school district. And I don't know if your school district is like mine, but any opportunity they can have to have people involved in the life of the schools in a safe and productive way is someone who's going to vote for a school board budget. And I think that's really important.
Joe, at our state tournament, we had a pretty global judging pool there. I had former students who now live in Australia who were, judging in the middle of the night for us. I had someone who judged dramatic interpretation finals, is currently a casting director in New York City, a former student of mine who was able to see what some of our young actors are doing. And that would not have happened in an in-person tournament. So there are some benefits to this too.
Now, of course, there are some concerns, and we would not be forthright if we did not mention those. And I think the most important of these is privacy issues. And I think what hopefully you've heard from our conversation here today is it's something that's very much in the mind of all league directors and all tournament directors, that we are being thoughtful about the privacy concerns to protect our students. And that has to be of utmost importance. And the platforms that we're choosing and how we're going to run tournaments obviously will intersect with those. And I know that our local league is already talking about how to make our local schools more comfortable with those, coming up with documents that specify what we know to be our security protocols, just so that people feel more secure about what they're doing. And as platforms evolve, they're encoding these privacy concerns into them in order to try and get past some of them. I know that, go ahead, John.
If I can kind of work off that, one of the great advantages of the systems that are being set up is your coach has to let you in. So therefore, if there is an issue of a privacy issue, we know who's behind the problem. And either we ask the coach, was this person competing and caused a problem? Which could happen live. I mean, we've had people in buildings who've caused problems. Or did the coach let somebody in whom they should not have let in? And we'd have to ask the coach, why did you put this person into the program? So I think the privacy issue actually, it's tighter here online than it actually would be in a school building where people can wander into the building or wander off from the basketball game over to the speech tournament.
And just as a secondary concern, I know that some school districts have privacy issues regarding Zoom, which is why the NSTA campus program, Lauren, correct me if I'm wrong, but it does not use Zoom as its underlying infrastructure for that reason.
Correct. An NSTA campus does not use Zoom.
Right.
It uses a commercial service like Zoom, but it's private within our system. It'll feel like Zoom, and it actually has some perks that Zoom doesn't, but it is not, there's not the ability for someone to Zoom bomb or to, share links in the same way. And so a lot of the horror stories that we've heard of things that actually do happen in Zoom rooms just simply are not going to be possible within this platform.
Second is access and equity, and that is a massive concern. You know, we shouldn't kid ourselves that all kids have the same access to broadband, that all kids have the same access to the right sort of technology. And we understand that those are concerns with the distance environment. I know that our local coach group has already gotten together to talk about that and coming up with solutions. One solution that we potentially came up with to solve that is if we are back in school, but still competitions are not happening, because I think that that's probably most likely, because schools are going to be a little bit reticent to let people not from their community in their buildings. I mean, a bunch of us were considering having our kids still compete in our building using our equipment so that we know they have access to reliable broadband and you're not relying on individual kids having differential access. And so that would be something that we'd be looking to local school districts to show support for the speech and debate program by opening their doors on competition days potentially to do that. Not that that would be a requirement, but that would be one way to address the access and equity issues. And I think the other thing that you're going to see happening is, and I think the NSDA did a great job with this at their national tournament, is having an equity team that is embedded into what is happening at those tournaments, so that kids as well as coaches know that there are people to talk to when there are issues of access and equity that is preventing or impeding their ability to compete.
We've also talked locally, Joe, about redistribution of funds. You know, one of the issues of equity certainly has to do with devices and such. And you know, we are planning, hopefully, to be competing inside of our school. And I know a lot of my colleagues are trying to do the same thing. But I know that there are going to be people who aren't in that situation and whose students may have some issues with having an adequate environment in which to compete and having an adequate device to use to compete. So we've talked about the fact that I'm not buying any plane tickets next year. I'm not, you know, there's money on the table that is not being spent in the same way. So maybe reallocating that to where it is needed could be something that we do for our community members.
A third concern is of course supervision if we are disparate from one another. And I think this is something that local leagues are talking about in creating the appropriate, for lack of a better word, netiquette about helping kids understand about the proper ways to communicate in this forum. I think it's going to become ever more important that we not only teach kids how to stand up in front of a room of strangers, but also how to present themselves professionally and in the right way in this format, because it's probably going to be, for our students that are graduating now, what a lot of their work environments may be looking like for their entire career. And so some of those issues of supervision come from teaching the kids how to properly supervise themselves, to engage in these platforms in the appropriate way, as well as create spaces for our students to come to us when they feel there are troubles. So those are some things that I know that we are thinking about as coaches and as league directors about this sort of environment. And so then finally, what I wanted to just give an opportunity, and building usage, I'm sorry, obviously building usage, that's going to be a concern. As Sarah said, not all schools are going to open their doors. Maybe no school will open their doors. And that's just something that we're going to have to be engaged in conversations with school districts with. I know personally, I've already engaged my local school district on the question, so they at least know that the question is an active question. And that would be something that would if there's any administrators here, to reach out to your speech and debate coach to talk to them about what they're intending of next year. And if you're a speech and debate coach, it is never too early to start the conversation. I don't expect any answers or any promises, but if you don't put your foot in the door, there's no way that you'll have a seat at the table when those decisions about extracurriculars are made in the fall. And so our last thing is that we just want to give a sense. We have people here from most of the Eastern Seaboard, north of DC, to get a sense of what's happening in local leagues next year. So why don't we start with New Jersey? Mary?
Well, in New Jersey, we had originally met back in May, and we weren't coming up with a calendar. With the exception of tournaments that might be happening in the regions, such as the Yale tournament or the Princeton tournament. But then we got together and we did put together a calendar. And right now we're trying to create an umbrella where we can have various coaches basically sign on board for the local tournaments at a high school, and obviously work virtually with those coaches in order to be able to sustain their program and the tournaments that they run. Because for many school districts, running a speech and debate tournament is a method of fundraising. And we don't want the local schools to have not have that opportunity to raise a little bit of money as and yet still at the same time having the opportunity for their students to compete.
New York, which is John and myself. John, do you want to speak about what's happening out on Long Island?
Sure. One of the things I'd say about Long Island, I know New York is a little bit the same way. In New Jersey, as Mary was saying, various schools host tournaments, and those tournaments are fundamentally run by that school. On Long Island in New York, we have, I call them the traveling teams. Where if we're going to your school, what do we want from you? We want bagels and coffee in the morning. We want lunch, and we want access to your Wi-Fi or your computer room or something like that. But we come in and run the tournaments. So it doesn't matter which Long Island school is running the tour, is hosting, the same people are running it from week to week. So therefore, for us, no matter where, oh, and Mary points out cookies. Yes, Mary has great cookies. No matter where, no matter what it turns out to be, we would have the same staff of people running each tournament. So for us, so we're not going to have a tournament at Half Hollow Hills East. We're just going to have the September 22nd tournament. So for us, our plan would be, until we can actually get back into schools, that we would just set up a schedule that would mirror the previous schedules, and it would just be run by the same people online. In terms of, because we're talking about before questions of finance and things like that, a large amount of our costs go to food for judges. So that's out of the way now. So we will be rediscussing what the fees would be for the coming year in terms of what things will actually cost. And then as Joe had the idea, which I've already looked into, for us, we would just purchase medals and send them to the schools, and the schools could give them out to the students, because sending a third place trophy to this school and a fourth place trophy to this school would not only become prohibitively expensive, but also somewhat complicated.
Yeah, in New York City and Westchester and a little bit north, we have decided that we're doing definitively our first half of the season online with the same schedule that we've always used, and that we would in January reevaluate to see if we wanted to do the last couple of tournaments live. But we are committed to the end of the calendar year definitively doing those tournaments virtually. I could also say for those people in our region that most of our local tournaments, invitational tournaments, have committed to a virtual experience, that being the Yale tournament, the Bronx Science Invitational. I know my debate tournament I'm doing virtually. Princeton is going virtual. Columbia tournament's going virtual. So most of the larger tournaments of the region have already committed to that virtual experience. And then Massachusetts.
So similarly, our board has decided that we will host all of the tournaments online through December, barring any major changes. And then we would reevaluate sometime in the middle of the fall as to what will happen in January. Interestingly, one of the other perks that we discovered, Joe, during our state tournament, talking with you and Jim and Charlie, who were so kind to come and help us out, got a few of us talking about how can we collaborate? How can we take lemons and make lemonade here? And that's one of the things that we did, is that we realized that our local tournaments don't have to be quite as local anymore. So that's one of the neat things that we're implementing this fall, is to do some collaborations with other states to co-host some tournaments.
So that's a perspective on what's happening locally. And I think the important thing just to emphasize again is that it's happening, that we are very much committed to creating experience about what's happening. So Mary, in terms of your question about how does a virtual tournament work, it works very much in the same way as a regular tournament. And yeah, there will be a school breakout room where you can hang out with your students throughout the day. So that's going to be encoded into the platform. It will have that sort of feeling of being at a tournament, but virtual. Or like I said, if you can go into your school building and do it, that's another way if you can't, if that's not something that's possible. Sarah?
So I helped out at NSDA and I ran one of the judge pools, and we had judge pooling rooms for each event, and I know that lots of coaches were using other platforms to have team rooms and such, but the tournament itself hosted judge pools, and people were coming in there and they were chatting with each other and smiling, and at first it was a lot of cameras off, and then you noticed as the day progressed, more and more cameras were on, and there was more and more chit chat between people. And it really did feel a whole lot like being in the auditorium in, Blue Valley High School or whatever. And it was kind of neat. And I think I said the name of the wrong school, sorry.
I think I can give, when I did the Nationals, or before that, I also did a number of online qualifications for the Ronald Reagan Great Communicators Debate Tournament. The first thing that you do, you can either have them meet in the meeting room, or for NSDAs, we got on what we called the virtual bus beforehand, where just made sure that everyone was there. You checked everybody in, you gave them all of the information they needed. And then from there, I mean, one of the things that has an advantage about this is you can just create rooms. So, when we've had in the past where we discover where we don't have a room, well, we'll create room 78. It doesn't matter. And we'll create a room for new LD judges to learn, a room for new PF judges to learn. And then when it's time to go, one of the things that Tab Room has done now is it can link to a map, or in this case, it can link directly to the room. So you click on it and it brings you right to the room where the debaters should be, and they're there. I mean, they're not wandering the halls anymore.
And so with that, I just want to wrap things up. We'll stick around to answer some questions after I turn the recording off. But before I do that, I wanted to thank Lauren for zooming on in from Iowa for us. You'll note that when in our introduction, we all introduce ourselves as district chairs. That's not normally the first hat that we put on, but in this meeting, we wanted to put on that hat because we want to send the message that the national organization is doing a lot to support us in this transition. And for those that haven't been members, I'm going to tell you the number of resources that the NSDA provides, specifically surrounding these issues of how to get your kids involved virtually, are really quite great. And I would say that joining the NSDA, if you haven't, is going to be a necessity coming in the fall for the resources that are going to be provided. So thank you so much, Lauren, for coming out and visiting the East Coast here. And thank you to everyone else that's here. Like I said, we'll stick around, but in closing, speech and debate is something that is happening in the fall. And it should be something that we are looking to get our kids really involved in. So thank you all.
Get on the virtual bus, as Brother John said.
Yes.
Get on the virtual bus. I'm going to stop the recording and then we'll take some questions if anyone has anything.